Welcome to the presentation titled 8,000 Days. We're pleased to have Curtis Ranter with us here today, Regional Vice President of Hartford Funds. Curtis and his firm have been great partners at Doble LeGrante over the years, and we're thrilled that he's here to help us with this topic. The research about 8,000 days comes from the MIT Age Lab and how life can be broken up into 8,000-day segments. Today, Curtis will focus on the last segment, the exploring stage, and how that data helps from the MIT Age Lab. If you have questions, please feel free to use the chat box, and we'll have Curtis cover those at the end. Without further ado, I'll pass it over to Curtis.
Awesome, Rich. Thanks so much for the opportunity to present on some of the research from MIT. Let me briefly explain kind of who we are at Hartford Funds. We really have two different alignments in the greater Boston area. One, on the investment side, we are aligned with Wellington Management. Wellington's been a money manager, been around since 1928, global headquarters based right in downtown Boston. So a lot of our investment research and themes that you all have access to come from our relationship with Wellington. The other is our relationship that we're going to talk more about today, and it's our relationship with the MIT Age Lab. So some might think about, what does the MIT Age Lab do? MIT was the MIT Age Lab has been around since 1999. It's part of the engineering school that you'll see Dr. Joe's picture on the right-hand side. He's the founder and creator of the MIT Age Lab research. What they do is study all aspects around consumer behavior and aging. The presentation today we're going to walk through is called 8,000 Days. Before we do that, I want to walk you through a real life example that you might think about. Back in 1999, when MIT did their first studies around aging, they focused solely on driving. So if you think about the car that you drive in today, think about the basic technology that we take for granted today versus 5 or 10 years ago. Whether that's the blind spot notifier on the right or left-hand side, or maybe the Bluetooth connection, or the Apple CarPlay that we have. We take all of these technologies now for granted. A lot of them have come through the technology and research that MIT has done studies around and how we can drive more efficiently as we age as well. Today's presentation called 8,000 Days. Some people might think, well, how long is 8,000 days? Dr. Joe and his team did a study saying that there are 4 phases of life. Each of them lasts right around 8,000 days, which is right around 22 years. So let me walk you through each 4, and then we'll dive into that 4th phase, as Rich mentioned, around exploring, and really where there is no blueprint laid out for you as well. So that first phase, the growing phase, when you're born to 22 years old, you're born, you go to school, you enjoy your teen years, you attend college or university. You then graduate into that second phase of life, which is your learning phase. That's when you start a professional career, you enter a relationship, you might get married, buy a home, or have children. That usually puts you right around your first midlife crisis, 44 years old. You then graduate into that third phase, the maturing phase. That's when you enter more of your prime career years. You enjoy a higher income, buying a car, a bigger house. You might even welcome grandchildren. And the average retirement age today is right around 66 years old. So for those first 3 phases, there really is already a blueprint for your average American today. Well, graduating into that 4th phase, right, 66 years old to maybe 88, or MIT came up with a rule that they call 63 and 36, saying a 65-year-old couple today has a 63% chance to live to the age of 90 and a 36% chance to live to the age of 95. So longevity is something that we absolutely have to plan for. We don't know if that next phase of life is going to be 8,000 days or 10,000 or longer. So during this final phase, the exploring phase, Dr. Joe Coughlin and his team broke out kind of that final phase into 4 different phases or 4 different stages of life during retirement. And they are the honeymoon phase, the big decision phase, navigating longevity, and the solo journey phase. So what I'm going to do is provide a little bit more clarity around each one of these phases. And they're not necessarily going to be exactly 2,000 days each, but it's something to think about as you then graduate into that quote unquote retirement phase of life. So that first phase is all about the honeymoon phase. We have reference groups in now virtually, but pre-retirees, and Dr. Joe and his team would say, what are you looking forward to doing the most when you enter retirement? Now, some people might say chase a little white ball around, do some golfing, traveling, spending time with grandkids. One of the most common responses that we hear is the continued role of work. And if you think about it, when we were able to go to cocktail parties and we meet people face to face, after that first question, what is your name? What's typically that second question? What do you do? And if you don't have purpose or meaning, that is a major detriment, we believe, based on cognitive ability and staying active during those retirement years as well. So the honeymoon phase is absolutely going to be some maybe more relaxation time, but the role of work is going to play a big role during that first phase of retirement as well, based on the longevity tables that we're seeing moving forward as well. Also, within the honeymoon phase, usually that average retirement age, as I mentioned, is around 66 years old. Think about that sandwich generation. If you're a baby boomer out there today, think about how challenging it might be from a financial aspect, where you now are or becoming a caregiver for your adult parents and or in-laws. And it's estimated that 61% of parents are providing some form of financial help for their adult children, ages 18 to 34, that have now moved back in with them as well. So the honeymoon phase is really all about that first phase when entering retirement, enjoying the things you've always wanted to do or new hobbies, but also think about how that role of work, not necessarily your career, but some role of work might play in during that first phase of retirement. Let's graduate into that second phase of retirement, which is the big decision phase. This is a major one. It's really about where you're going to live. Dr. Joe Coughlin has done a lot of studies around people moving more frequently after the age of 55 years old than from 0 to 55 years old. So think about where most Americans want to age in place. They want to age in place where they currently live today. Over 90% of Americans, when answered, said they want to age in a current home that they're in today. Well, think about where your master bedroom might be. Is it on one level or is it upstairs? If you had a fall and you needed to be in a wheelchair, are any of your doorways even wheelchair accessible? Do you have a wheelchair ramp in the front or the back side of your house? So realistically, if 90% of Americans want to age where they currently live today, what type of financial modifications would you have to make to your home to truly age in place? When we look at out-of-pocket expenses, once you hit the age of 65 to 85 years old, top 3 out-of-pocket expenses surprise some. Usually when I'm doing this presentation in person, I'll ask the audience. Healthcare usually is the #1 response. Healthcare is actually the 3rd out-of-pocket expense from 65 to 85 years old. #1 out-of-pocket expense is around housing. Now think about maybe that's the modifications you're going to make to your home. Maybe that's moving to a 55+ facility. Maybe that's moving to some type of a skilled nursing facility. #2 out-of-pocket expense is around transportation. It's really around that mobility, whether it's your own car, whether it's a car payment or insurance or mobile ride. That mobility is very important during your retirement age. And then 3rd, as I mentioned, is healthcare. So top 3 out-of-pocket expenses, again, housing, transportation, and healthcare. Let's graduate into that 3rd phase of retirement, the navigating longevity phase. It's estimated that 92% of older adults are managing at least one chronic condition, and 77% are managing the complexities of 2 or more chronic conditions. This is all around health. And unfortunately, but realistically, husband and or wife might enter some type of healthcare complexity. What type of plans do you have in place? Healthcare proxy, utilizing other resources within the healthcare space, just to make sure that you have planned for the unexpected. This also plays a role in terms of becoming a caregiver. The average caregiver today is 46 years old, and it's a female. She has a full-time job, and she is now caring for her own family, as well as her parents and or in-laws. It's estimated to cost as a caregiver $9,000 or $10,000 out of pocket from a healthcare standpoint and the time spent is around 44 hours per month. So that third phase, the navigating longevity phase, is all around the healthcare proxies, the healthcare resources that hopefully you have planned for the unexpected when that does happen. Let's graduate into that fourth phase. The fourth phase is all around the solo journey phase. And unfortunately, husband and or wife might pass away at some point. If you look at the longevity tables, most likely it's the male that passes before the female. It's estimated in the US that women over the age of 70, 43% are living alone inside the United States. 43% are living alone, either divorced or widowed. The solo journey phase is all about what is that next phase of life. You never think something bad is going to happen to you or your own family until it does. And think about if you had planned for those unexpected events. The average age of widowhood, and we've double checked it multiple times in the United States, is much younger than some people expect. It's 59 years old. So a lot of people ask when it's too late, when's the appropriate age to start planning for that next phase of life? Well, that solo journey phase might come when you least expect it. And if you do have those plans in place, that transition for loved ones will make it much easier on your family that you leave behind. There's also a period of life that Dr. Joe and his team have talked more and more about recently, and it's the divorcees over the age of 50. They call it the gray divorce. The number of people getting divorced over the age of 50 has more than doubled over the last decade. So whether it's a solo journey phase, doesn't necessarily have to deal with death. It might deal with some form of divorce or separation as well. So depending on your age that you're going through this phase, you might then revert back to stage 1 or stage 2, where your own circumstances from a financial standpoint and where you're going to live might change as well. Let me leave you with a few thoughts, and I thought this is a good way to end the presentation from MIT. They list out the ages that you peak at everything. And it's not listed on this brochure, but we can think about kind of those phases of life. And at age 18, they say you peak in terms of your brain processing power. At age 25 is your muscle mass. At age 30 is your bone mass. At age 40 is an opportunity to win a Nobel Prize. At age 69 is life satisfaction. At age 74 is your happiness with your body. And at age 82 is psychological well-being. Rich, appreciate inviting me on to kind of share some of MIT Agelab's insights and thoughts around 8,000 days. And let me pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Curtis. This is wonderful. I love this topic. And as an aside, I've been lucky enough to be invited by Curtis to the MIT Age Lab and spent some time there, got to meet Dr. Joe, and I can say they're doing tremendous work there. And it's so interesting about how, you know, they're really spending the time that they are on helping folks navigate these retirement years. And it's exciting that it's in our back door and we can kind of take advantage of it. A couple of questions that actually came through the chat, which is great. I'll start with my question first. This information is wonderful, you know, and you take it in and you look at the different 8,000 day segments. But what's kind of next for someone who's approaching, you know, the 8,000 days of retirement or that exploring phase? You know, what should people be thinking about, or, you know,
Sure.
kind of like what's next?
Absolutely. So I would say plan before it's too late. I think most human nature is we get a little bit complacent. We never think it's going to happen to us. And if we plan for the unexpected, we're going to be much happier when entering into those challenges. So what I mean by that is have your clients really think about you as a longevity manager rather than just a financial advisor. Yes, you do complex financial planning. You pick the right risk profile for them, the right investments for them. But that next step is really maybe leaning on you to be a connector of some of the other resources, whether they're going to move from an assisted living facility or a certified aging in place specialist, or from a healthcare standpoint, right? Leverage some of the relationships that you've developed over your career to then be the connector to some of your clients as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And that's great advice, and that's what we try to do already. So that's good. Couple other questions from participants. Three questions actually. The first one is in the solo journey for those age 75 plus. What are some factors that contribute to them having the highest well-being sentiment? I saw one of those pictures. I'm assuming that's what they're mentioning, the highest well-being sentiment for those 75 plus.
Sure. Yeah, great question. Dr. Joe and the team at MIT talk about this all the time. And there's really a very simple answer. Number one is staying socially active, staying socially engaged, maybe hanging out with your peers or also a younger generation. That will absolutely keep your mind fresh and keep you very well energized as well. Number two is mobility. And mobility is all around that mode to transportation. So we mentioned that's the number two out-of-pocket expense in retirements. So if you do at some point lose your license where you lose that mobility, make sure you're still making an effort to still go out and be social, however that might be. So staying socially active and staying mobile will lead to the best cognitive health in that 75 plus age.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Next question. Hopefully doesn't catch you off guard. This is a percentage question. What percentage of folks age 65 plus are still in the workforce?
Sure. Yeah. So MIT would say it's just north of 20% age 65 and older that are still in the workforce. And I think the number may be a little bit lower than some expected because a lot of people then leave their career to do something part-time. And if you look at just the generations, the baby boomer generation is one of the largest. But in the workforce today, millennials represent the largest representation in the full-time workforce.
Great. Okay. And the last question that we got, what phase is best to start considering a retirement community or assisted living?
Sure. Before you need it. I think as early as possible, Dr. Joe and his team would say. I think that the ideal phase is probably during that honeymoon phase or maybe even just before that. If you do have kids and you now are an empty nester, we are seeing a lot of people sell maybe their 3,000 square foot house in the suburbs and move back into a city, right? You may be thinking about what type of conveniences you have when you walk out your door within that mile. So I think as early as you can, before you might even need some of those facilities, just go out there and explore, see what type of options are there for that next steps in the big decision phase.
Wonderful. That's great. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time, Curtis. This information is always helpful. It's always interesting. And thank you again. And we look forward to keeping these conversations going. And everybody stay safe and stay well. Take care.
Thanks, Rich.